Good morning, good afternoon. My name is Nicole Mayer. I'm an associate director at Adelphi Research. And to give an introduction, I work at Adelphi as a qualitative researcher, but I've worked on both qualitative and quantitative projects. I co-lead the DEI initiative with Jenna, and we help consult with teams on various DEI-related topics. And I also wrote 2 white papers on the importance of recruiting diverse samples and to ensure a representative sample. And I'll pass it over to Jenna.
Hi everyone, my name is Jenna Levin and I am a Senior Project Director at Adelphi Research. I've been working with Adelphi Research for over 3 years, conducting primarily quantitative research. So I'll be providing that quantitative perspective to our conversation today. I also co-lead the Adelphi Research DEI initiative with Nicole, where we run trainings and small group discussions on DEI topics, such as inclusive language and pronouns. Additionally, I consult on projects and proposals to strategize for DEI-focused studies and ensure those studies utilize inclusive language. And I'll pass it back to Nicole to kind of discuss what we're talking about today.
Thank you, Jenna. So welcome to our panel discussion. Today, we're going to discuss pharmaceutical market research and focus specifically on recruiting diverse populations and ensuring there's a representative sample. So I'm going to switch slides. To give a rundown of our agenda, we'll start off with an introduction of our panel members. We have some questions that they're going to talk through, and then some additional information at the end.
Okay, so we'll go straight into our introductions of the panel members, and we'll start with Shantae.
Hi, my name is Shantae Wallace. I am a project manager at Adelphi Research. I do both quantitative and qualitative research. I come with a unique perspective as I work currently on the research side, previously worked on the vendor side. My specialty is recruiting rare patient recruiting.
Thank you, Shantae. And now I'll pass it over to Beth.
Hi, everyone. I'm Beth Riley. I'm the Senior Vice President of Global Operations at M3 Global Research. Under my responsibilities, I'm in charge of the project management for both qualitative and quantitative research. We specialize in fieldwork and recruitment, so both of those teams fall under my purview here at M3 as well. At M3, we primarily focus on the recruitment and fieldwork services for healthcare and patient market research projects. I've been with M3 for almost 12 years and in the market research industry for over 17 years. In addition, I'm a member of the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Task Force and Committee for Intellis. For those that may be unfamiliar with Intellis, it's the leading organization for health insights and analytic professionals, which also includes global manufacturers, service providers within the pharmaceutical, biotech, and medical device space. Part of my involvement in the committee is that I've helped create a library of inclusive professional and patient screening questions, as well as hosted a number of global focus groups to detail what DEI means on a global scale within market research.
Thank you, Beth, and we will pass it to Grace Ann.
All right, thank you so much. Hi, everyone. My name is Grace Ann Wazer. I'm an associate director here at Adelphi Research. I primarily do qualitative research, so I am a moderator, but I do dabble in quant a little bit. So I bring a unique perspective to this discussion today, as I actually started my career in clinical research. I began by recruiting patients into cardiometabolic and renal disease clinical trials. I then started using patient preference methodology to plan a clinical trial in ischemic cardiomyopathy. Before I used that patient preference expertise and passion to launch a career in market research. So I've done a lot of work in patient preference, patient journey. I've certainly worked with rare disease, and in my current role, I do a lot of work in women's health, so specifically in gynecological cancers. So I'm really looking forward to this discussion today and bringing that expertise and just diving right in.
Awesome.
All right, thank you for those introductions. So I guess we'll just jump straight into our questions for the panel. So, oh, great, Nicole. So Our first question is, what are some common challenges you've encountered when trying to recruit diverse and underrepresented populations for pharmaceutical market research?
And anyone feel free to jump in.
Yeah, I'm happy to start. So I come from the fieldwork side of things. So one of the big issues that we have on our end is that the underrepresented groups aren't always in panels. So when our clients are coming to us, they may be looking for something very specific, and it may not be specifically impaneled within our reach and the folks that we have. So a lot of that has to be done through custom recruitment efforts, which can take a lot of time. And I think that's one of the main struggles that we sometimes see from the fieldwork side of things, is that all of our clients want things done yesterday, or as quick as possible. And sometimes reaching these groups will take a little bit more time, because we're going to be doing things through custom efforts, which will include social media, partnering with influencers, working with podcasters we've done in the past, going through patient advocacy groups, and even working through referrals. So when you're doing that type of recruitment, it does take some time. So, what I always advise my clients is to make sure you're building in some extra time for that recruitment, because it will take some time to find these underrepresented groups. They're not the same ones that, are typically participating in market research. And another challenge that I've seen is a lot of our clients asking for overrepresentation. So not really knowing what, they know what they want to show, but thinking that the population is much higher than it actually is, and not really doing that research to understand what the right breakdown should be.
Thank you for that, Beth.
Yeah.
Totally agree. I also think a big issue is just being familiar with market research in general. We know what it is because we're in the industry, but those on the outside looking in aren't as familiar with it. So that's a challenge within itself, is becoming trusted, essentially.
Absolutely. So I think on the project side, one thing that we deal with, and we want to make sure in all of our research, we're truly getting those diverse voices. So getting a broad representation for that sample. So something that comes up is how can we make sure that even in these rare diseases, that everyone's voices are being heard? So for instance, in sickle cell disease, we want to make sure if it's possible to include Latino and Hispanic patients in addition to Black and African American patients. Things like with hemophilia, this is primarily in males. Can we get some representation with some female patients? So really just making sure that we're getting that diversity, but that can be really hard. I mean, if it's such a small population, then how can we find these patients? What can we do to find these patients? And what can we best do to temper our clients, their expectations, to make sure they understand, kind of like what Beth and Shantae were saying, but there are timing implications to this. So, and there's cost implications. So just making sure that everyone is on board with those expectations.
Yeah, and I think that what you all are saying really aligns with some things I've heard in my own research, talking to patients and doctors from underrepresented groups that don't necessarily participate in market research. So the idea of time and also trust, like, am I actually going to get paid just to give my opinion? What is market research? Anything else to add?
Yeah, just from like a quantitative perspective, since we can, and on the quant side, we tend to take surveys online. So just that accessibility to taking those quant surveys, i.e., do people have computers to take the surveys on? So that sometimes could be a challenge in recruiting any population, but especially underrepresented populations.
Yeah, a lot to think about. Anything else?
Sorry, just to add on to Jenna's point, she brings up a really great point about accessibility. So in qualitative research, we can do things like if we're using a stimuli and if a patient or if somebody doesn't have a computer, you could come up with like different ways to feed them that information. So you could read things to them, just making sure that to be inclusive of certain populations, we want to make sure that we're not creating any additional barriers with accessibility. So that's a great point.
Mhm. What I hear a lot is about giving options. So some people might not be comfortable with a webcam interview, but they're totally fine with a telephone interview, or assuming that someone has the knowledge to work a smartphone, but allowing for someone else to help them use that smartphone. So lots of things to think about. Okay, so I'll move on to our next question. What factors do you consider to ensure the research will deliver valuable and actionable insights for our clients? And how does this differ by project?
I can start again on this one. So when looking at it from a DEI perspective, by factoring in diverse populations, you help ensure access to both treatment and care to underrepresented populations. With proper representation and supporting DEI initiatives, it will help improve patient outcomes and it will create a more inclusive culture for healthcare in general. But when companies don't factor this in, there are some potential consequences from my experience. And that's in developing commercial strategy and tactics based on the insights gathered of homogeneous patients and healthcare provider populations. Companies can miss a significant opportunity to understand and meet the diverse needs of potential customers. And companies can also risk making assumptions about those missing patient and provider populations that are underrepresented, especially their attitudes and behaviors. And it may miss the mark on how a company appropriately engages with that customer base.
Yeah, definitely very interesting. Anything else to add or reactions to Beth's point?
I think just to get back to one of the points that Beth previously made, which I think was a great one, was just making sure that you understand the disease area and what the research truly needs. So things like if a disease is more prevalent in one population compared to another, does it make sense to really, go for that population? Making sure that you're not including subquotas that are too restrictive. While you want to be diverse, you want to make sure you're not, restricting yourself by having these subquotas if it's not relevant to the research or if it's just not, common in certain populations.
I absolutely agree.
And are we prepared to, lead with empathy and understanding and a listening ear to make sure that, yes, the objectives are met for the research, but also that the patient or respondent feels that they're being heard and they're being valued.
Yeah, and just to build off Shantae's point, I think we also want to consider, at least from a quant perspective, is time, because it might take longer to recruit a specific sample, and within quant, we want to have a specific sample size so we can get those statistically significant results. So that's also just something to consider.
Yeah, and I really appreciate the point about leading with empathy, because as far as with my research, it seems like people that are doing market research really appreciate being heard and they want to provide good insight. And so I think having that reciprocity and treating them well will encourage them to come back and also add to the valuable insight.
Absolutely.
And I think what I really like that Nicole has done on some research that we're working on is she's actually introducing herself to the patients and caregivers with a moderator bio to really make sure that everybody feels comfortable with her. They know who they're speaking to and what their participation in this research is going to include, but also how they're helping. I think getting back to that, patients, everybody just wants to feel like they're making a difference. So when you can really explain that in a way that resonates with someone, I think that's really important.
I totally agree. Making them feel like they're included and hearing them and seeing them. That's so important to a respondent coming from a panel company. We hear about that all the time. I just talked to a respondent yesterday who was thanking me. He sent me like 3 emails back to back thanking me for listening to him and hearing him out. And, it made me feel good, but I imagine, how it made him feel and seen.
Mhm. Yeah, I've definitely had that experience. Even doing online bulletin boards where you're kind of commenting back and forth with the respondent, and they're saying things like they like being able to contribute, they like that altruistic aspect of it, and they like feeling like a partner in the research, not necessarily someone being studied. So I
Right.
think that's something that's really interesting and great about what we do. Any other comments about this question? Okay.
Okay, so our next question is, how can market research agencies work with clients and vendors to broaden representation?
Happy to start again unless somebody else wanted to.
I
Okay.
mean, one thing that's coming up for me is this kind of communication before the project even starts, talking about what are we actually looking at? Like, is this population right? What do the timelines look like? And what are the actual expectations of our project? And just making that very transparent up front.
I think
Yeah.
even in the proposal stage and RFP stage, I think it's okay to ask clients those types of questions and translate it over or transfer it over to our vendors, just so everyone's on the same page.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's so
making
important
sure,
for, oh, sorry, go ahead, Dave.
I was just saying, just making sure our objectives are understood across the board from the very beginning. It kind of sets the project up for success, and it makes everything run smoother in general.
Yeah, I completely agree. Communicating what the goals are, from a vendor perspective is so important. It allows us that, knowing early on too, it allows us to do desk research and especially on a global scale, because DEI means different things depending on where you're doing your research. We can provide that guidance of what you can expect. And the more time and the earlier we have those conversations, definitely the better. I would say also just ensuring that your screening criteria is asked in an inclusive manner. From my experience on the Intellis committee, I mean, like just thinking about gender identity, I mean, asking it as that as opposed to gender. I mean, sometimes there is a need to understand what, gender was at birth, but asking it in that way and always including options like prefer not to answer really makes a big difference for a person when they're going through that screening process.
Yeah. And it's interesting you brought that up. I recently had a conversation with one of my colleagues about even just updating the screener and gender questions to include, more options. And yeah, it's just we're always constantly evolving so we can meet the highest standards.
I think also a lot of our clients actually work with patient advocacy groups, which I think this is really important because these patient advocacy groups, some clients actually have patient advocates that they work with. Some also have key opinion leaders in the space with reach into these patient groups. But working with these patient advocacy groups, it's great because you can make sure that you're accessing these patients or respondents for the research. So I feel like bridging the connection between the clients and then the vendors, and then also some of these on the ground, community groups, so to speak. It's really important that we all kind of have that working together.
And making them comfortable with coming back to do research again, because we always want repeaters. So it's just that comfort level, and making everyone, the KOLs that, Grace mentioned, the advocacy groups, just making everyone comfortable.
Yeah, and I think that also goes back to the idea of trust. So first, trusting that this is actually a legitimate ask. I'd like to exchange this for your opinion, but then also trusting that I know who I'm talking to, I know where my information is going, I know what to expect when I'm starting this market research.
Yeah, and like from the panel side, I mean, one of the key things that we've been doing is really making those relationships with, influencers and key opinion leaders within like the patient space, because these are people that those patients follow, they trust, they're getting information from. So by us building those relationships with them, I mean, it helps in terms of, getting the right target audience in there.
Something that also came up for me when I was writing my second white paper was sort of this difference and overlap between recruiting underrepresented patients and doctors. And so on one hand, doctors are more likely going to know what market research is, but there may be some doctors that we want to speak to, but we need to be flexible with our screening criteria. So doctors that are seeing more diverse patients or in a certain type of area, they might have a lower patient volume. And that's something that we need to discuss up front and be aware of up front so we can get that person's opinion. They still screen in, but maybe some of the screening criteria needs to be flexed. So I think that the difference between recruiting underrepresented patients and underrepresented HCPs is something really interesting to explore.
Completely agree.
Me too. It's a great point.
Anything else on this question? Yep. So how do you measure the success of diverse recruitment efforts? What does that look like?
I can start with this one. I measure success by, is the bigger question answered? Did we notice a trend? Do different cultures, backgrounds, genders, etc. feel heard? To me, that's a successful project. That's something that we strive for.
Mhm. I don't think it's necessarily always about the numbers. It's more about the content that we're getting from those respondents. So I completely agree, Shantae.
Yeah, finding that underlying disparity, if it can be brought to light, I mean, that's a big win by including them.
I think exactly what Shantae said. Everybody just wants to have their voices heard. So if everyone feels heard and included, I think that's certainly a measure of success outside of just, achieving, quotas and targets. Really just everyone feeling heard, feeling good, and us just getting really good insights because of that.
Mm-hmm.
And a big win too, I think, for the industry is seeing that more projects are asking for these subquotas or these requirements in their projects. I mean, I know that a couple years ago it was never really asked, like in terms of quotas, especially for healthcare providers. But now, we're seeing more and more projects, which tells me that the message is getting out there in the industry of how important this is of a problem to fix. And I think that that's a big accomplishment.
Yeah, I'm definitely seeing that too. It's really exciting. And I know this conversation is sort of about the challenges and obstacles, but I think that we have a lot of great solutions coming up too. And I think that one part of success with these kind of projects is the fact that as we talk to these people and kind of see which recruitment efforts are working, which ones aren't working, hearing directly from them, I think that will improve it even more.
Absolutely. I think being flexible and realigning totally helps with that to reach, the success that we're looking for and to making sure that everyone feels heard.
And I think also just little achievements, they shouldn't go unrecognized. So we can't reinvent the wheel overnight. As long as we're trying and we are doing better than what's been previously done historically, that's a step in the right direction.
Mm-hmm. Definitely very encouraging. Any other comments on this question?
Okay, so for our next question, our almost final question, what steps can the industry take to continuously improve recruitment for pharmaceutical market research clients?
I think it goes back to making everyone feel comfortable, because that's how we're going to get repeat respondents, is, making sure that those that we do get to participate, keep them, and, keep the conversation going. Don't just look for someone when you're looking for someone, look when you're not looking.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead, Nicole.
Oh, no, I was just saying, I really love that point. That's great.
Yeah, I mean, putting in these requirements in the projects is so important. And I think I just strongly encourage all of our clients out there to make sure that this is one of the top priorities that we have, because with it we'll start to see more change, and just make sure, sort of, I know I mentioned this before, but ensuring that the screening language is inclusive, and you're keeping an inclusive mindset when you're putting things in place for the project in terms of schedule, because some of these respondents are going to be working different shifts or different times, and you want to make sure that you're accommodating to that. People with children, and how expensive it can be to get childcare if it's an in-person, those are things that we should consider, to make sure that we're working around, for the respondents.
Absolutely. I think also just continuous outreach. So once the research is done, just thinking about what's next, right? So a lot of respondents will say, okay, like, well, what is this research going to? Like, I want to know. And, sharing that information with them can be really helpful, keeping them engaged. Asking patients have asked, oh, is this going to go into a publication? Can you share that with me? So just making sure that they feel valued and heard, and, that they're giving their information for the right reasons. And I feel like when you continuously engage with others, they're more willing to, like Shantae has mentioned, to be, repeat respondents. They're more willing to join us again because they felt good that first time and they got a lot out of it. So,
Mhm. And I
And
think just to add
understand,
to that, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was saying, and just understanding that word of mouth travels.
Mhm,
If,
that's exactly what I was going to say.
yeah, if we're known to do things the right way or in an inclusive manner, word of mouth will travel.
Mhm. And then you've already done the legwork of developing trust with that person, because it's not just a company that they haven't heard of talking about market research, which they also haven't heard of. It's someone that they know saying that it's legitimate and actually it was empowering and it was positive for me.
Yeah, and I just want to emphasize, the time that it might take to, build the trust and all of this, and, having that patience in mind so we can get those respondents and build that trust and empathy. I think that's important as well.
Yeah.
Great. I think that was our last question. So next, I just want to ask, what are your closing thoughts about recruiting diverse populations?
I'll start. I think as an industry, we have made recently, some really good progress in this area. And I hope to continue to see it grow and develop, and, have more patients, respondents, physicians of all kinds, just feeling comfortable to participate.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like the urgency is starting to be there. The requests are um, more prevalent, and I can tell, like, from the field work and recruitment side of things, having those relationships, with patient advocacy groups, and you know the physicians that we need to participate in these future projects is there, and we're building it more and more. And the more requests we see, um, the stronger those relationships are going to be. And with patient advocacy groups in particular, I mean, having that that bond with them is so important for the next project. And I think that we all need to continue growing those out, and familiarizing them with market research as much as possible, because once they understand the background of it, from my experience, they love participating, they love advertising it to their members, and it can be a great way to help improve that overall reach.
I think familiarity is growing, and we need to, dig into that. We need to, make sure that we're continuing to bring those HCPs back, bring those patients back, bring the consumers back, just so that they see where this is going, and that this is something that they can do. This is something that they can talk to, their friends or their family about. And it just helps to grow the industry and to bring more diverse populations.
Great. Thank you so much for those. And then we just have some additional information. Gianna, do you want to close out?
Yeah, sure. So on the screen, we have Nicole Maher's two white papers. The first one on the left is about diversity in sample recruitment and why that's needed. And the second one on the right is about what prevents underrepresented populations from participating in market research. So if you're interested in reading these white papers, you can contact Illuminate at adelphigroup.com, or an Adelphi team member can forward these papers to you as well. So yeah, thank you so much to our panel members for participating, and for our audience for watching. If you have further questions or want to have a further conversation, please feel free to reach out to Nicole Maher or myself using these emails. And yeah, thank you so much. And please be sure to check out future Black Health Now events with OHG.
Thank you.